All right, everybody. Wanted to do just like we did for the homeowners policy. I wanted to do some sample problems that come up from the personal auto policy. So remember, same thing, personal auto policy, that is a standard form. If you look through the textbook, it's in the back of the book if you actually want to see it. But the textbook refers to it as the PAP, personal auto policy. It's a standard form already approved for use in all 50 states. I could start an insurance company tomorrow and use that policy. Bigger companies are using their own policies, and they are laid out in similar fashion, but sometimes have small differences there. For example, for a time, I don't know if this is still the case, but for a time, State Farm would actually cover you in Mexico as long as you were within 50 miles of the border. Now, I don't know if that's still the case. If you're planning on driving to Mexico, the personal auto policy, the standard form, that excludes it. So you'd want to know if you're planning on driving to Mexico, you need to call your agent, find out if you're covered. But that's just an example of how the big companies might have some wording that doesn't exist in the personal auto policy. So we're going to focus on the personal auto policy here. We are going to give you some information. So we got two types of vehicles here for the Arneson family, again, same family that starred in our homeowners problems. They have a 2016 Toyota Highlander, 2015 Acura. I have to give you actual cash values. You can't calculate that. I suppose you could if I said go to Kelley Blue Book and come up with an estimate of the value. I don't think that's worth asking you to do. I think let's go ahead and just give you the values. And then I have to give you the coverage limits, right? So coverage A, that's liability. They've got $100,000 per occurrence. Now, what do you notice about that? Is that a single limit or a split limit? Yeah, that's a single limit. That's unusual. Most of the time, this is going to say 2550 or 5100, and usually three numbers. That's just the bodily injury piece. So 255010 or 5125. That would be really common to see. But we just have a single limit here, and that's going to mean that it doesn't matter how many people we hurt. It doesn't matter whether it's bodily injury or property damage. For every accident, 100,000 in liability. That's what we have. And that's a lot easier to deal with. There will be problems on the exam that use the split limits. And I've got some examples we can go through later to show you that too. I'll put up some additional problems for you. So coverage B, medical payments, much more common, $1,000 per person. That's a max. So you can see fairly low. Seriously injured in an auto accident, medical payments coverage is not going to help you all that much. Uninsured motorist, here we've got a split limit, 10 and 20, right? 10,000 per person who's injured per accident, 20,000 in total. And then we've got coverage D. We've got, which is going to be the maximum is the actual cash value of the vehicle minus the deductible. And here they've got different deductibles for collision and other than collision. That's not unusual. Sometimes people do have different deductibles here, but I do think it's a little nonsensical. It seems to me if I have damage to my vehicle, it doesn't matter if it's collision or other than collision. Either I can afford to pay $500 out of pocket or I can't. Saying that I have more available to pay in the case of collision, that doesn't seem to make sense to me, but that's what we're given. So we're going to go ahead and go with that. All right, let's go ahead. The first one. Anna Arneson is involved in an accident on the way home from her kickboxing class. A court awards $35,000 each to two injured persons in the other auto, and then also awards $40,000 for damage to the other auto. So we've got two injured people, right? We got person A, they're entitled to $35,000. Person B is entitled to $35,000 as well. And then we have property damage that's being awarded here of $40,000. What do you get when you add all that up? Yeah, when I add that up, I get $110,000. So these are all liability coverages. This is coverage A. So coverage A, that's not the problem, but the problem that we're going to have here is only $100,000 is going to be paid out, right? Because that's policy limits. So what happens to the extra $10,000? The Arnesons are going to have to pay for that out of pocket somehow. And if they don't have it now, they'll have to make payments, and they'll have to make payments until that bill plus interest is settled, and no matter how long it takes. That could potentially be a real problem for this family. So the Highlander, this is the car that Anna Arneson was driving, is a total loss in that collision with the Lexus. So what happens here? Okay, well, I'm driving. I damage my own vehicle. What coverage do we have? Yeah, coverage D. So this is damage to your auto. And if it's a total loss, that means we're going to pay the policy limit, which is actual cash value, $18,000, minus the deductible. Is this collision or other than collision? Yeah, they tell you it's a collision. So we've got $18,000 minus $500, and that means that the insurance company would pay $17,500. That's the answer under coverage D. All right, Junior, home for the summer, is speeding in the Acura, and when he can't hold it in the road, he crashes into a pizza parlor. It's a really bad crash. We lengthen the word, 2 A's. Crashes into a pizza parlor. Damaged pizza oven, $12,000. And you say, a pizza oven for $12,000? My goodness, how is that possible? I looked into opening a franchise of a pizza chain one time, and you'd be surprised. Pizza ovens are expensive. $12,000 is nothing. Think $50,000. Industrial type ovens. So if that's the damage, $12,000 there's a hole in the wall for $10,000, also property damage. There's an injury to a customer of $25,000, and then there was a customer that was killed, and his estate is awarded $60,000 in damages. So when we're looking at this, what coverage are we looking at? Yeah, this is all liability. So this is all liability. Coverage A. We've got some property damage, we've got some bodily injury. That doesn't matter because we have a single limit here. If this was a split limit problem, it could matter. Right? That would depend on where the limits are set. So let's the easiest way to do this is to itemize the damages and add them up. The pizza oven cost $12,000. That was the damages. The hole in the wall, that damage was $10,000. Injured customer, that's $25,000, and then the estate of deceased customer, that's $60,000. And when you add all that up, I get $22,000, $47,000. I get $107,000. Scroll down a little bit here so we don't get too blocked. This is all covered under coverage A, but the problem we have is the same problem we had in the first problem. There's a limit. So the insurer pays the policy limit of $100,000. Wait, I thought we already paid out the limit. Why are they paying out the limit again? These are per occurrence limits. So yeah, if you're unlucky and you have all these accidents, yep, you can collect multiple times. They can't cancel you for that. Remember, we've only got 3 cancellation conditions. Having a lot of claims isn't one of them. So the insurance company is not going to be real happy with the results of this particular policy. They're probably going to end up non-renewing this policy. But in the meantime, they're stuck with it, and they're going to pay all the claims that show up. So in this same instance, Junior was driving the Acura. Let me back up. Is Junior an insured? Yeah, if he's home for the summer, that makes him a resident, and any resident family members are going to be automatically covered. Does it matter that he was speeding? No, there's no exclusion for speeding. And you might say, well, that doesn't strike me as right. How come the insurance company doesn't exclude things like speeding and drunk driving? The problem is the people who are hurt usually are innocent third parties. And so if you exclude coverage, what you're really doing is making it so that somebody who's an innocent third party doesn't have a way to recover. And so that's the reluctance to exclude those kinds of losses, even though you would be forgiven for saying, hey, that sounds like something that shouldn't be covered. That isn't an exclusion. All right, so the car he was driving in that accident where he smashes into the pizza oven sustains $10,000 in damage. Any damage to the car he's driving, that's going to be handled under coverage D. So this is damage to your auto. And we need to remind ourselves, well, what were the limits here? The Acura's ACV, actual cash value, is $15,000. This loss is only $10,000. It's not total. So we've got that minus the deductible. Is this collision or other than collision? Yeah, there's a collision. So there's a $500 collision deductible. The right answer here, $9,500. He hurt himself in that accident. Medical expenses amount to $11,000. Where do we find coverage for something like that? Yeah, that's right. This is going to be handled under coverage B, medical payments. So this is coverage B. And how much is going to be paid? Yeah, the limit here is 1,000, so that's it. All right, Sven Arneson, new problem. Returning from a party in a slightly impaired condition. He hits his garage with with a new vehicle that he purchased to replace the Acura because the Acura is damaged. Damage to the garage is $5,000. That's his garage. And damage to the new Mustang that he's driving is $2,000. Okay. Well, a couple things. First of all, does it matter that he's impaired? He's driving while intoxicated. Again, you could be forgiven for thinking that this ought to be excluded, but it isn't. We didn't talk about an exclusion for intoxicated driving here. That's not going to cause us a problem. We got two losses here. We've got damage to the garage. And this is $5,000 was what was given to you in the problem. What happens here? Well, what coverage could apply? Let's look. So I damage my own garage. Sven damages his own garage. Coverage A is liability. Can Sven be liable to himself? No. Coverage B is medical payments. That's not what we're dealing with. Coverage C is uninsured motorist. That doesn't have anything to do with this. Coverage D is damage to your auto. It doesn't say anything at all about damage to your property or your garage. So if the question is, how much is the auto insurance going to pay? The answer is 0. And that's because there is no source of coverage. What coverage would you have? Nothing applies. What about damage to the Mustang? Well, that's damage to your auto. So that's going to be covered under coverage D. And how much? Well, wait a minute. Let me back up. Is the Mustang a covered auto? Yeah, this is a replacement vehicle. This is a newly acquired auto. So yeah, technically you've got 14 days of coverage. It turns out you have much longer coverage if you're replacing an auto in the declarations. We didn't go over that. The issue is that this is going to be a covered loss. As long as it's replacing one in the declarations, you're okay no matter on the time limit. And we know no matter what, even if it's not replacing, if it's a brand new vehicle that you're adding, we know you have 14 days. So he's going to be covered for this loss. How much? Well, the amount of the damage minus the deductible. He ran into his garage. Is that collision or other than collision? Yeah, that's going to be collision. That's impact with an object. And so the right answer here for the whole problem is $1,500 is what's going to be paid. So damage to the garage, we're not paying anything. Damage to the Mustang, that's damage to your auto, and we'll pay $2,000 minus $500, the deductible, $1,500. Okay, hardest one on here is number 7. So if you've been following along okay for now, this is your real trick, your real test. See if you understand this one, because I do think this one's about as hard as it gets. While trying to leave tire marks in the driveway with her boyfriend's car, daughter Rebecca shifts into reverse and crashes through the Arneson's garage door. So she damages the vehicle that's in the garage. She damages the garage door. And so the issue is this: whose insurance is going to pay? She's driving her boyfriend's car. Whose insurance is primary? What do we know about insurance in vehicles and drivers? Insurance on the vehicle is primary. Insurance on the driver is excess. So we're going to use the boyfriend's insurance policy on this one. Anybody who drives his car with his permission is covered under his policy, and insurance on the vehicle is primary. So if the boyfriend has insurance, because the next question is, well, what if he doesn't? And that will change the problem. Okay, well, if the boyfriend has insurance, we're using his insurance, then this is a liability loss. So coverage A pays for these losses, and that's going to be $3,000 for the door and $1,500 for the door and $3,000 for the car that's in the garage. So So the total, if the boyfriend has insurance, his insurance policy is going to pay $4,500. It's completely liability. It's just as if he did it. And that's how it would be covered if he did it. If the boyfriend has no insurance, well, what happens then? Well, then it looks a little bit like the problem before it, right? So she drives a car through her garage door. No source of coverage for the door. I mean, again, coverage A is liability. She can't be liable to herself if we're using her policy, and no insured can be liable to themselves. That doesn't make any sense. So there's no source of coverage there. B, C, D, same thing. That doesn't handle if you drive into your own garage door, same as it was in number 6. What about the Mustang that's in the garage? Well, that is going to be covered under damage to your auto. That's part D. And how much are we going to cover? Well, repair costs are $3,000 minus the deductible. Is this collision or other than collision? Collision, same thing. And that means we're going to pay $2,500 in total for that loss, only for the car in the garage. So look at how different this is. This makes a big difference whether the boyfriend has insurance or not, doesn't it? That's kind of neat. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of moving parts in this problem. I could split this up into 2 or 3 or 4 problems on the exam, and that would be complicated enough. Putting them all together in one, yeah, that's really hard. If you followed that, that's really good. If this makes sense to you, then I'd say, yeah, you probably got a pretty good grasp of all of this. So good for you. All right. Let's talk about number 8. We've got the Mustang being repaired. Sven rents a car from the local Hertz outlet. He declines the collision damage waiver that the rental car company was going to sell. Runs a stop sign, hits a school bus, damaging the car that he's driving for $2,000 and $6,000 in damage to the school bus. Okay. So is he covered when he's driving this rental car? Do his coverages from his policy apply? Yeah, your covered auto, the definition includes temporary substitute vehicle. That's what this is. So his coverages go with him in any vehicle that he drives if it's a temporary substitute. So his coverages are coming along with him. He hits the bus. That's liability. And then he damages his own car. Well, all right, that's a covered auto. That's a temporary substitute vehicle that comes under the idea of your covered auto. So it's going to get handled just as if it was your auto. So what's happening here is he'll get $2,000 minus the deductible, collision or other than collision. Yeah, a collision again. We've had a fairly consistent remark there. And that means the total that's going to be paid here is $7,500. $6,000 is paid under coverage A and $1,500 is paid under coverage D. I guess I could note that here. Okay, so $7,500. All right, moving on. Number 9, the Proclaimers. See, I try not to just educate about insurance. I try to educate about music as well. The Proclaimers, of course, had that one big hit, I'm Gonna Be, you may know it better as 500 Miles. Guaranteed karaoke hit. Absolutely golden, highly recommend. But anyway, they're driving home from Wild Adventures was a theme park nearby where I used to teach at Florida State. And they would have all kinds of musical acts that used to be popular would come and play there. So when I was teaching at Florida State, there's a funnier problem there than it is here. Anyway, they're driving home from in the lead singer's car. None of that really matters. Here's what matters. Deer runs out into the middle of the road. Car collides with the deer, causing $4,500 in damage. Okay, well, a couple things. I wasn't very careful here. If they have the same coverages that the Arneson family does, I'd have to say that on an exam problem. I was just trying to give some more examples. Here's what we're really trying to get at here. This is covered under coverage D. Is this collision or other than collision? Careful here. It sounds like it ought to be collision. He collided with a deer. That's what it says. Remember that impact with an animal is actually other than collision. Other than collision here. And what that means is we don't use that $500 deductible. We use that $250 deductible. And yeah, if those deductibles are the same as the Arneson's. So to be technically correct, we have to say that. And that means that the total being paid here is $4,250. Again, assuming they have the same coverages. When I'm on the exam, I got to give you that information. You can't intuit that yourself. There's no way to do that. You got to take what's given. So number 10, Randy Moss. Don't know if you guys remember who that was. He was a famous NFL wide receiver. And this actually happened when he was playing for Minnesota. After a game, he very, very slowly, he ran over a security guard who was trying to tell him to stop. And he didn't like that. He drove right over her. It's kind of a big deal when it happened at the time. So he intentionally runs over a security guard. It causes $15,000 in medical expenses. I made that part up. If that happened, how would that loss be settled? This loss is excluded. Why? Well, this was intentional. I told you in the problem, he intentionally ran over somebody else. If we can prove that, then yeah, the insurance company isn't going to pay that. In reality, it's hard to prove sometimes. But here, if you're told it's intentional, then you know it's excluded. All right, so I'm proud of this one, number 11. Leonardo DiCaprio borrows Kate Winslet's car and crashes into an iceberg. Get it? It's a Titanic joke. Well, more on that in a second. She doesn't have collision coverage. He's driving her car. She has no collision coverage. Does his policy cover it? Well, insurance, how does that work? Insurance on the vehicle is primary. Insurance on the driver applies, but it's excess. So she doesn't have collision. No collision from her. What about from him? If he has collision, his policy will cover the damage. And again, it'll be actual cash value minus collision deductible. And here it's not about the amount so much. It's about letting me make a Titanic joke. Speaking of, Titanic, that's like 20 years ago. More than that. Gosh. Can I still make jokes about Titanic? Is that still funny? Okay, good, because I'll never let go. All right, number 12, an angry, rejected American Idol contestant rams Simon's car in the parking lot and speeds away unidentified. We've got Simon's car damage is $8,000, and Simon incurs $12,000 in medical expenses. How much of this is covered by uninsured motorist? Okay, well, uninsured motorist, does that cover property damage or not? Remember, in most states, it applies only to bodily injury. That's why I wanted to do this problem. So Simon's policy will pay $12,000 for this loss. But if you're using the Arneson's limits, just notice real quick, they don't pay more than $10,000 to any individual person. So if these are the limits that apply to the problem, it's a little bit trickier. It's not just the bodily injury. It's actually limited to $10,000 here. If I really cared about that, I would have had to specify. The idea that I was trying to get at is we don't cover property damage. Look at this, 10, 20, and we don't have a third number. How come we don't have a third number? Bodily injury per person, bodily injury per accident. What was our third number? Property damage liability. Uninsured motorist doesn't cover property damage, so you don't have a third number. It's 0. That's why that's there. So we're only going to pay for the bodily injury, and that means that only only $12,000 of this loss is going to be covered. And if he has the same limits as the Arneson's, then you'd only get $10,000. And again, that's information I have to give to you. It's not clear the way I wrote this problem. And just sometimes people point that out, so I wanted to mention it. Okay, great. Those are some sample problems of similar difficulty of what you could expect to see on the exam. If that made sense, great. You're in good shape. If it didn't make sense and you want to clarify, hey, let me know. That's my job. That's what I do. Happy to help whenever I can. Thanks a lot, you guys. We'll go from there.